And it does take a long time to make that big decision, but you have to be really grounded to prevent staying stuck.
Grounded, supported, right? Like having that conversation with my spouse, that emergency cushion. There's just so many things that need to happen for that, but absolutely just the ability of having your why. And I teach that even in the financial journey with the women is like, oh, I always fall off the budget. I always overspend and I shouldn't. And so I was like, that's because your why isn't strong enough. That's because your why isn't clear.
Let's face it, money is a major part of our career decision-making. So how can we make sure we have the right mindset around money to go after the career we really want? Hi, this is Diana Bernal with Corner Office Latinas. I'm a career strategist who guides ambitious Latinas through major career moves so you can reach your goals. Today, I speak with Michelle Velasquez, financial coach at Virtuous Wealth Building, about how to foster a mindset of abundance, know your worth, and make sure your choices line up with your values. Let's jump in. Hello, Michelle. Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Hi, Diana. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you and I have both made career moves, and we know that finances are a big part of the consideration, the fears, the planning. So I want you to jump in right away and start talking about the mindset, because I feel like for a lot of women, it's how we approach money, how we think about money that influences all these decisions. So tell us about the conversations you have with your clients around mindset.
When we talk about mindset, we talk about this fear, right? Like we have this fear of the unknown. We grow up being a little bit afraid, being conditioned, right? Like as a mom, you're like, my mom doesn't want me to do this, or what are people going to say, or, things like that. And as adults now, you kind of will bring this with you, right? These habits, these ideas. And so when you're making this shift, there's this huge fear. And with that fear comes like, you want to go back to that comfort zone. For myself and the clients that have helped leave the 9-to-5s, that's definitely something that all of us had in common.
It's like you have to tackle the mindset before you even start the planning of the savings, the short-term savings and the insurance and all those mechanics.
Yes, I actually have a training called Millionaire Mindset on how I help women prepare their mind, right? Like know you're valuable, know your worth, know the skills that you bring to the table. So the better that you start shifting that mindset and know that you're ready to receive, like you want an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset. Because I think so much with our culture is like, at least for me as a Latina, I grew up my parents saying, be grateful that you have a job. And I would be like, well, I have a master's, I have experience, like I'm grateful, right? But at the same time, I felt like I was being minimized, like everything that I worked hard for. And I think so many times women, we do that.
Yeah. And I think I have the same family experience, by the way, because, you and I are both from Chicago, where, rich people are crooks. They are corrupt and all the bad things. And so we grew up, or at least in my household, thinking that rich people were bad. And that's not the case. Rich people are not bad. There are many, many good people. So how can women sort of combat those stories that have been told, especially when they fear it from their own parents?
I think that it's really a conversation of what money can do for me, for my family. My mother's a widow. So we recently had this conversation where my husband and I are real estate investors. And she was like, ¿Para qué quieres otra casa? You guys already have a lot, And I had to sit down with her at Panera and say, Mom, you're a widow. You didn't ever really have a job. Thankfully, Dad left a life insurance, but it's not like there was a lot left. And I said, if there comes a day that you need something, I'm comfortable knowing that I can help you provide that. And just being able to think, what can money do for me? What can money do for my family? What impact has God called me to do? And so when you start thinking like that, you're just like, wait a minute, if I have more money, I can help more people. I can do more things for others. That is beyond me.
Yeah. And so much of what we talk about too is the Latina pay gap. So I talk to clients about, look, this is the legacy that you are leaving for other Latinas to follow. Because if you increase your pay and the expectations of pay, then the people that you mentor, the other women that you work with can start living up to that. So talk a little bit more about the relationships though, because so often when a woman makes a career change, she does have to think about her spouse, her partner, the impact on the rest of the family. Do you get into those conversations with some of your clients about how they should have that conversation at home?
Well, actually, a lot of my clients are couples. So I have the opportunity to talk to both of them. And so this is where we have these conversations on like, are you comfortable? What is your fear? In order for you to leave, what needs to happen? What would you be comfortable? And then I help both of them create a list. And then we have like deadlines and we start tackling things. And so that's kind of a little bit of how I work with the couples, right? Like they're both motivated by different things. Both value money differently. You might have a spouse that is like, I value the now, the vacations, good cars. And then you might have the other spouse that's like, I value like having college and money for retirement and money for my parents, right? So really knowing what we each value and then come to this middle ground of like, okay, I don't want to just save for our retirement and not spend money right now, but how about if we just do 1 or 2 vacations or something like that? So then we come to this middle ground, but that's definitely a conversation that I have with couples.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Everyone coming up with their values and then meeting in the middle. You get your vacation this year and maybe the spouse gets their vacation the next year. So what are the more details of the things that you talk to about women who are changing careers, whether they're worried about making the same level of pay or the same types of benefits? What are some of the mechanics that you walk them through?
So some of the things that we walk through, number one is we start with like the mindset, right? Like the scarcity towards abundance. Then I guide them towards healing, where some of us have these traumas. I like to call them money traumas, like whether we grew up with our parents, whether it was a previous relationship, whatever it is that has shifted your mindset. And so then we kind of got to identify those traumas. We have to go through a process of healing. And then after that, I kind of go towards a budget. Like, hey, can we afford this now? And if not now, when? And then we create a date. And there has to be a date in place. Because what happens is I'll have people like, yeah, I want to leave my job. And then my first question is by when? And that kind of like, oh, like at some point, right? Like, but once you say it, like, let's put a date. And then let's now create a list of what needs to get done. Let's start checking off what we're doing. I check in with them. How can I help them? And then, then once they have that emergency cushion, I like to give a 6-month cushion of expenses.
Yeah, it used to be 3 months, but today it's definitely 6.
Yeah, especially nowadays with both spouses working, most people have a 2-income home.
Yeah, definitely. Well, why don't you spend a minute talking to us about your work? Tell us what you do.
So I help women through one-on-one coaching, women and couples, really, where I have a program where I just walk through with them for 6 months. And then after 6 months, we work together for a year. Then I'll check in like once a month. And every client is different. Some clients come to me like, hey, can you help me save for a house because of my real estate experience? Others are like in debt. Can you help me create a debt strategy? Other women are like, I have $50,000 in a savings account. I have no idea what to do. So everybody that comes in is different. So my program, I tailor it to you. It's not like a cookie cutter program that we follow.
Yeah. And so walking through those things, when a woman wants to make a career change, you can show her not only what she needs to do, but maybe what she already has. Maybe she doesn't realize that the assets that she has or the resources available to her are abundant enough that she can make that shift.
And the skills that they develop, right? Because sometimes we minimize the skills. Like you will have women that are like, well, I don't have management experience. Okay, did you ever lead a team? Did you ever volunteer maybe a church girl that you had to oversee somebody like? And sometimes we minimize those that we don't highlight those. So I like to look at what have you done? And I kind of like take all these notes of everything that they've previously done. And then we kind of explore some options of things that they should highlight.
Yeah. And when women say, oh, I don't want to start over, like they're making a big change, I tell them, you're not starting over. You're not starting entirely from scratch. You are pivoting, you are pivoting all those skills to something new.
Yeah, and this morning, actually, I went to my niece's eighth grade graduation. And as I was driving out, I was like, you know what? If I was working, I couldn't probably be here today because I would have to ask for leave, ask for something. Last week, my niece graduated from college. I'm able to coach my kids' soccer team. So there are so many things that we focus on. We should focus on what can we do with this ability, this time, this freedom, this flexibility.
Yeah. If you focus on also, like you said, like who else are you serving? The relationship with your family. Like my daughter just dropped on me yesterday that her AP exams are Wednesday and Thursday. And I'm sure I knew that somewhere in the back of my mind, but I didn't know I had to get her to school at 7:45 in the morning. But I can do that now. 5 years ago, I might not have had the same flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about your career move, though. You have a very interesting one. Tell us about Michelle before being a financial coach.
Wow. So I was in law enforcement for 16 years. I was with Homeland, was on multiple teams. And after COVID, I pivoted. I think I was on a specialized team that I was able to work from home. And that wasn't heard of, right? Like you working for the agency and law enforcement working from home. But because of what I was doing, I was able to. In that season, I got to see my son get on a bus, the yellow bus. I had never seen that because I had to be at work at 7:30. So I never got to see my kids get on a bus. And when I saw my son Marty turn back, he was already like 7 years old. I was just bawling. And at that point, I was like, you know what? He's growing up so fast. My husband and I had a couple properties already. I was like, why am I still working this 9 to 5? And my husband has been super supportive since the beginning. So for me, just the time I'm ready, he was like, all right, it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. And then what about like pay and benefits? Was there anything that you had to juggle or negotiate when you made that switch?
Of course, I did a lot of research first. So there's a lot of research, there's a lot of stuff that happens before you just jump, right? I think that would be irresponsible to just jump, especially when I carry the benefits as the government employee. But because of Cobra, I was able to keep my insurance for 18 months. And I think it was quoted like $2,100. And when we started quoting private insurance, it was about the same. So I told my husband, we're going to keep the government insurance for the next 18 months. And then now we already had research that pricing was going to be about the same. I think the only difference was that the government insurance allowed me to have like physical therapies and chiros and all that stuff. So that's what I did.
Well, and I think the research is such an important part of it. And there's no excuse not to get that because everything is available online. But I like to think of research in two different strands. There's the mechanics about Cobra, about health insurance, about a CD, what they're paying right now for 6, 12, 18-month yield, et cetera. But there's also the research on success stories. I think hearing your stories, hearing from other people is what can help motivate women to say, I can do it too. Mm-hmm. I think that's sort of the hurdle. Like the mechanics kind of become almost fancy procrastination, that perfectionism, right? Oh, I've got to have everything lined up before I quit my job. But then here you are. If you keep waiting for everything to be perfect, you will be there for 12 months, 18 months, 3 years. So help us push people sort of over that hurdle of perfectionism.
I was that forever student. So you're speaking to somebody that was like, I can't jump yet. I'm not ready. And my husband was like, well, what else needs to happen? Like financially, we're okay. We've made the list. I put all the kids in doctor's appointments. I did dentist appointments for everybody. Like I have this whole list that I make people go through. And at that point, I was just like, okay, what else? It was just an excuse. Like it was fear. And I actually did this fear challenge with a fellow coach of mine, Lisba, who's a fear coach. And it was a 10-day challenge. And it was so helpful to have the accountability of a group of women that we would have to go live every day for 10 days. And so we made a list of 10 things that you needed to do before you left. And we started with the hardest one first. And for me, one of the hardest was to speak to one of my chiefs who was like a father to me at work. So once I had the hardest done, I was like, I don't care about anything else.
And let's talk about that conversation, because I think too often when we have that tough conversation that we're going to have, we feel like we're going to let that person down. They've invested so much time, whether maybe it's your parents who put you through college or not, or just are, were your cheerleader in the corner. The conversation is never as bad as we think it is it?
It definitely was a surprise for him. I had been pushing financial wellness into our agency for 2 years, and it was just like, not yet. We don't have a budget, not yet. And then he comes to me and he says, "Hey, Michelle, we have a budget and we're finally going to wear this financial wellness." I was like, oh my God, that was the day I was going to tell him I was going to leave. So I was like, oh my God, I can't tell him now. So then I said to him, what if I train 10 coaches? I said, what if I train people? Because I felt like God was using me to push, and not necessarily because I was the one that was going to run the show. So I prayed about it and I said, Lord, I'm confused. Do you want me to stay? Do you want me to go? And I felt like God was like, no, Michelle, your job is just to advocate and push, train people and let them do their thing. So after the training that I trained 10 people, I talked to my chief. I said, can I talk to you real quick? And I said, I know you see that I've been mentally struggling here with motherhood and the business and the coaching. I said, but I just really want you to know that it's time. And he was like, time for what? And so he was like, I'm going to support you. He's like, even though I think this is crazy. And they were like, are you sure you don't need to talk to AP? Maybe mental health, some services that we can help you with. Have you heard of this program that you could take leave for a year? And I was like, no. I said, my kids are not going to grow up in a year. I said, I have 4 kids under the age of 10. And I really felt like God was calling me more into motherhood and into helping other Latina women know that they can do this.
And I think that's a great example of why it's important to be grounded in your why. We always talk about, why are you doing all these things? Because if you weren't 100% confident in what you wanted your life to look like, to feel like, to be like, you would have hesitated. You would have stayed. And it does take a long time to make that big decision, but you have to be really grounded to prevent staying stuck.
Grounded, supported, right? Like having that conversation with my spouse. That emergency cushion. There's just so many things that need to happen for that, but absolutely just the ability of having your why. And I teach that even in the financial journey with the women is like, oh, I always fall off the budget. I always overspend and I shouldn't. And so I was like, that's because your why isn't strong enough. That's because your why isn't clear.
No, clarity, I think, is really key. But I think you also hit on something, that you need to be prepared, but you also need to be prepared that something's going to derail you. Here you were ready to give notice and think that you were going to be gone in 3 or 4 weeks. And instead that conversation probably put things back a little bit. I'm reminded of once, like the last time that I did leave a job and I gave notice and I was ready to go. And sure enough, the first week of the month, we had this manager's meeting and somebody else announced his departure. And I was like, oh man. So it set me back maybe 4 or 5 weeks, but I was indeed grounded. Like, no, this is what I'm heading towards. Like I tell a lot of my clients and friends, it's not about what I'm running away from. It's what I'm going towards. So you do have to be ready that there might be a few bumps in the road. But if you are clear on where you want to end up, then you can push yourself there.
And something that I want to talk about, Diana, is the relationship with my spouse. I feel like my husband was missing this wife. Because the moment I left, I've always felt like I had a good marriage, but now that we work together with some of the real estate stuff, we've been able to take 3 work trips together. Right now we're planning an energy summit coming up. And so just also the relationship of you not being the wife that possibly your husband wanted. And my husband, I don't think really said much to respect, and he didn't want to push me to feel like, oh, you left because of me. I think he wanted me to make my own decision, but he was always very supportive.
I think that is a testament also to the conversations that you guys have had, right? And that's an important part of it, to have that dialogue, because a lot of guys are thinking, or other partners are like, oh yeah, that's fine. Let's go. I'll support you. But in our heads, we create the narrative like, oh my gosh, what are they going to say? They're going to be disappointed. They're going to expect different things from me. And just because I'm an entrepreneur working from home does not mean that I am making breakfast, lunch, and dinner all day for y'all. Yes. I'm working harder, actually.
Right. And really setting those boundaries, right?
Oh, yeah. Talk about boundaries for a second, please.
So for me, we recently had this conversation because I felt like I was spending a lot of time with his business. And then I said, honey, I'm going to give you Mondays where we can regroup and set the schedule for the week. But I really need Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to continue to grow my business. And so sometimes I have to like go upstairs. We have two offices here. Go upstairs, or if I have to go work somewhere else. But I also give them the time for our family empire, right? Like I also do work with our real estate investors and stuff. But it's just really having those clear conversations. And I think one of the hardest was, I think in the beginning, spouses want to dump what they don't want to do. And it's like this, okay, well, I don't want to do it and you have time, but I don't want to do that either. So I had a coaching session with a couple recently where I had them draw two circles, like when you were in school. And I said, what don't you like to do? What don't you like to do? And then I made them put a list. And what was the same that we didn't like to do, that's what we're going to outsource. Because then resentment starts to build in marriages, especially when you work together.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. I think having those conversations out loud is what you're saying, because then the minute we say something out loud, it also feels less scary, less of a big deal. But in our head, right, we're creating the narrative that this is going to explode into an argument. And that's not necessarily the case. You were saying relationship. And when you said the word relationship, I thought you were going to say relationship with money, but you said with the spouse and the partner, which is just as important. But women and their relationship with money, that is so hard. And, how can we keep at it? How can we have a healthier relationship with money?
I think it's really identifying our triggers. Like identifying, and you said earlier, derail. And I actually, with my clients, always tell them, let's have an irregular expense account for those derails, especially if you have a pet, right? Like if they get sick or something happens, that Costco run that's like $500 later, right? You walk into Costco for one thing. So really starting to set that irregular expense account. So when that derail comes, you're not fully thrown off. And so it's really knowing what triggers you. And when I say what, it's what emotion. I always like to talk about emotions. Because I think that as women, we tend to overspend when we're upset, when we're angry, or if you grew up with the scarcity mentality mindset, that you're like, well, I didn't have this. So I find a lot of moms, I was like, well, I wasn't able to buy this when I was young, or I wasn't able to do this, but now I'm doing it for my kids. And so it's kind of like, well, I don't want them to feel the way I felt. And it's really identifying the feelings.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about kids. You have been doing some work to make sure that kids have a better understanding of money, that households start that conversation early. Tell me about the books.
So I recently rolled out a series called The Dinero Kids, and it's a series of 4 books teaching children concepts about money. I did not grow up talking about money or budgets or anything like that. But as my husband and I continue to grow our wealth, we're teaching our kids like the real estate, how to fix things, how to do things. And so it's like, wait a minute, if I'm teaching my kids, why don't I help other parents teach their kids? And I created in here. The first book is spending, because what do kids want to do right away? They want to spend money. So this one is spending for children. I use my kids. I also felt like it was a legacy. It was a legacy to leave behind. But the Dinero Kids is not my kids. The Dinero Kids is really us teaching other children. And to be a dinero kid, to be a savvy kid. And so this is book 1. Every 6 months, we're going to roll out another book until we hit the series of 4. And if it's a huge hit and success, as I expected, then we will continue to do more. But that was really the story behind it. Because I'm doing it for my kids, why not help you for yours? And I wanted to ensure that Latino kids saw our colors, piñatas. Like I read it at a school recently, and one of the kids was like, oh my God, there's conchas in there. So they were able to relate and identify.
And I think that's so important to start the kids at any age, especially if we are that first gen success story, right? We kind of have to double down. We kind of have to accelerate compared to other families who have second, third, fourth generation wealth in their families, because they grew up with these small nuances that they don't even think about. Right? But we have to think about it and instill it in our kids. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that I did with my teen girls when they started getting jobs at the mall, right? I said, okay, if you put some of this money in an IRA, what's that? Don't worry about it. Just, they had $150 each of them from like Christmas and birthday. I said, I will match it. So you'll get a $300 instead. Would you like that? Yeah. So we opened the Roth IRA for one and a Fidelity account for the other because she was younger. And that's it. They're sitting there. And just the other day, I said, look it, your account gained $20 from doing nothing. And they're like, oh, that's so cool. And then they walked away and did whatever. But, starting somewhere to have that conversation and how important it is to invest in an early age.
And also reward. We don't talk about that, but like with clients, after they leave me, I leave them a homework assignment saying, come up with like 5 rewards that every time you hit a milestone or a goal, whether it's having a glass of wine or going out for a couples massage or whatever, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but come up with some ways to reward yourself so you don't feel like I work so hard and I can't even buy a coffee or I can't do this. And so that's great to do for the kids and adults.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Tell me about the other book before I let you go.
The other book is I'm part of Latinas en Finanzas. It's 18 Latinas in finance. We share a story and we share a gem.
Yeah, that's excellent. See, those stories of inspiration. I think that's another thing that some women can do is in their own community. Who are the women that you can go out for brunch with and have these safe conversations? That community, I think, can be a real part of it. And I think some of your programs have community as well.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, any final thoughts you want to leave us with, Michelle? Like if a woman came to you right now and you only had 10 minutes with her on the bus, what would you tell her to do?
I would just say, number one, why do you want to do it? To provide that clarity for her, right? Once why we want to do it and we're clear about why, then what's stopping her? And then come up with that list. And then what do we need to do? And then create that list of to-dos. I like to do an exercise with clients where I have sticky notes and just everything that you feel you need to do, sticky note. And then I'm like, let's organize it, but what needs to happen first? Like a little map. And then as you're doing things, start taking it off. You're like, wow, this is amazing. And then you have the power to change the trajectory of your family's financial future. That's what I want to tell her.
Right there. I think that's your memoir. I think that's what we're going to title your memoir. Michelle, where can people find you?
People can find me at VWB Coaching as the social media handle. My website is www.vwbcoaching.com.
Okay, I'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. For more, visit cornerofficelatinas.com, where we give you the framework, inspiration, and support you need to reach and thrive in the corner office. We have some free downloads on the website, where you can also sign up for our e-news so we can keep you posted on workshops and events coming up that you will not want to miss. That's cornerofficelatinas.com. See you next week.